starting?
No, we start now.
Tonight's Gosho is on repaying debts of gratitude. And before we get into the Gosho lecture, which will appear from President Ikeda and from the hope-filled teachings of Nichiren Daishonin, and the lecture will begin on page 222, do understand that this particular Gosho is one of Nichiren Daishonin's, considered by Nikko in IKKO. It was designated as one of his 5 major writings. Okay, we've never done this on video before. We did the opening of the eyes on video, but that was actually reading the lecture, okay, with President Ikeda discussing specific points. This time, because we've been reading the full Gosho each time, I'm going to read the full Gosho. Now, I knew when we got this book that we were going to start this, that this had this in it. And I knew what it was going to be like to take this on. So please, I ask anybody that's watching or anybody that's around the table to please ask questions if you have questions. And if you see the end of the video, put it in the dialogue box or in the the comments section, and I'll try and go through and help clarify things, because it's very important that if you're going to listen to me read this, that you understand what I'm saying, okay? Or else I'm not supposed to even read it to you, okay? As you'll find out when we go to the cover letter here in a minute. So this is one of those kinds of teachings that really are based on the recipient and the person endeavoring to understand it should have faith. This should not be a Gosho that you give to somebody to introduce them to Buddhism. Okay, this is for believers. All right, and it was inspired by the death of Dozenbo. Now, does anybody know who Dozenbo was? Dozenbo was Nichiren's teacher from Seichoji Temple. Okay, and Seichoji Temple was primarily a Nembutsu school. Okay, temple, and so subsequently. Obviously, his teacher, his Dozenbo, his mentor, who put him on the path and gave him a lot of the understanding that allowed him to understand more as he went along, didn't chant Nam Myoho Renge-kyo initially. He chanted the Nembutsu, right? And the Daishonin, when he came on April 28, 1253, whatever it was, and gave that lecture, came back to Seichoji, he denounced Nembutsu, right? So Dozenbo didn't necessarily go along right away. So this actual Gosho is written to the 2 priests that smuggled him out that night, that kept him safe, that Dozenbo sent. Get him out of here. Okay, so you'll read it in the background. But the title is really important because it's a very deep thing that it says on repaying debts of gratitude. Because what is the basis of this teaching? What is the primary teaching of the teaching? It's faith in the teaching, okay? And if you have faith in the teaching, then you're automatically led to a state of mind in which you are able to embrace an understanding of what gratitude should be based on, and how serious a circumstance that gratitude is as it relates to you expressing it with your life. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay, so, Buddhahood is nothing more than a state of perpetual gratitude. It's one in which you understand the good things and the bad things are all a reflection of you, and a great conviction that that's leading you toward a clarity that's going to allow you to fulfill your mission as a bodhisattva of the earth. So therefore, you're constantly grateful for everything. You see everything connected. There is no division, and so subsequently you have gratitude for all things, even the things that seem to be in opposition, because those are the firewood that allows you to actually reveal Buddhahood. If you don't have those motivational issues to inspire you to dig deeper into terms of understanding of faith, or to act upon your practice in a way that you fulfill your function as a bodhisattva of the earth, which means you're trying to help other people understand as well, then you're not going to get where he wants you to go. Right. Okay? So let's start, instead of on page 690, where the Gosho actually starts on volume 1. And again, you can read this online, or you can read it on a tablet, you can read it on a phone, you can read it out of a book. But going to the cover letter first, because he sends a cover letter with this Gosho, because this Gosho is 51 pages long.
Yes.
So we're not going to get through this in a week or 2 weeks or even 3 weeks as far as me reading through it. And I don't want to read it through it so quickly that there's a lot of confusion or lack of clarity. So I'm going to take my time because I've got time. And let's just start on page 737 with the cover letter that he's writing to the recipients, which are the two priests that he's known and that have actually embraced faith. There's a letter to Gijobo. That's one of these two individuals. If you know that Gosho, we've already read it. I have received your, it says cover letter, page 373. I have received your letter. One should never speak of matters pertaining to the Buddhist doctrine to someone who has no faith, regardless of whether the person is a close friend or relation or a stranger. This is something that you should keep in mind. And why does he say that? Because people out of ignorance can slander the law.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to put them in a position of slandering the law. If they don't have any kind of a seeking spirit, why would you start with a major writing like this, which is going to take on basically everything? This is going to give you the history of Buddhism. This is going to give you the history of how Nichiren came up with Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to a great degree. Okay? How Tentai came up with his teaching of the Makashikan. Okay? How this whole lineage of the Lotus school actually came forth from, you know, the Lotus Sutra into the former day and the middle day, and now it's the latter day. And now he's making an update that's going to last for 10,000 years and beyond in Mappo. This is the Buddhism of sowing, right? So he's saying, I have received your letter. One should never speak of matters pertaining to the Buddhist doctrine. And this is going to be a lot about doctrine. That's why I got to take it slow. To someone who has no faith, regardless of whether the person is a close friend or relation or a stranger. This is something you should keep in mind. That's why I'm a little anxious about doing this. I have inscribed the Gohonzon for you. Okay, so that means that they're receiving that now, or they've received it in the past. More and only very staunch believers actually received Gohonzon. Okay, he says, I have inscribed the Gohonzon for you, even more in the years after the passing of the Buddha than during his lifetime, even more during the middle day of the law than during the former day, and now even more at the beginning of the latter day of the law than during the middle day. The enemies of the Lotus Sutra are bound to grow in power. If you understand this, you, as well as anyone else, will realize that there is no one in Japan other than myself who is a true votary of the Lotus Sutra. A sketchy report of the passing of the Reverend Dozenbo reached me last month. I felt that I should go in person as quickly as possible, as well as sending the priest who bears this letter. By the way, the priest who bears this letter is Nikeo Nico. Okay? However, though I do not think of myself as one who has retired from the world, other people seem to look at me in that way, and so I may make it a rule not to leave this mountain. This priest informed me of private reports from various people that there are likely to be doctrinal debates with the other schools in the near future. I have therefore been sending people to a number of temples in the different provinces in order to search out sutras and treatises from all over the country. I had sent this priest on such a mission to the province of Suruga, and he has just now returned. So I am sending him with this letter, Nico, because Nico was out doing different things, right? In the enclosed treatise, I have written matters of the utmost importance. It would be wrong, therefore, to make the contents known to persons who do not understand the essence of Buddhism. And even if they are made known only to persons who do, if there are too many people involved, then word of the contents is likely to reach the ears of outsiders. That would not be conducive to your welfare nor mine, because he's going to refute the other schools in a very direct way. He's going to call them slanderers. All right, in this doctrine, he's going to qualify. That's what it really is in the latter day. Okay, and at that point in time, not enough people knew or believed in his teaching that would not have attacked those that took that position. So he's saying, don't just start rattling this off to everybody. This is for the future. This is for you to know. This is I'm embracing this in your keeping. He says, therefore, I ask just the two of you, you and Gijobo, have the work read aloud 2 or 3 times at the summit of Kasamagori with this priest to do the reading. Now this is a 51-page letter, okay? Imagine reading it 2 or 3 times. That's going to take more than an hour or an hour and a half, right? Mm-hmm. Please have him read it once before the grave of the late Dozenbo as well. After that, leave it in the possession of this priest and have him read it to you repeatedly. Now, I have read this repeatedly. I didn't have a priest read it for me, but it's what he's basically saying is that this is the kind of teaching you don't just read once. Mm-hmm. You have to embrace it over the course of your life. Okay, I've been practicing 45 years. I'll read it again right now. He says, if you listen to it again and again, I believe you will come to understand and appreciate its meaning, which I hope you all can. With my deep respect, Nichiren. Going on to the next page, the background of this Gosho on page 738 says, this lengthy treatise is one of Nichiren Daishonin's 5 major writings. It is dated the 21st day of the 7th month, 1276, a little more than 2 years after the Daishonin had taken up residence at Minobu. It was prompted by the news of the death of Dozenbo, a priest of Seichoji Temple in Awa Province, who had been the Daishonin's teacher when he first entered the temple as a boy of 12. Nichiren Daishonin wrote this treatise to express his gratitude to Dozenbo and sent it to Jokinbo and Gijobo, senior priests at the time he entered the temple, who later became his followers. He entrusted this text to Nikko, one of his disciples, that's Nikko Nikeo, one of his disciples, and requested that it be taken to Seichoji on his behalf and read aloud at Kasagamori on the summit of Mount Kiyosumi, where he had first chanted Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and again in front of the tomb of his late teacher. In 1233, Nichiren Daishonin entered Seichoji Temple to study under Dozenbo. At that time, temples served as centers of learning as well as religion. During his stay at this temple, the Daishonin developed his extraordinary literary skills that later proved so valuable in propagating his teachings. He also embarked on a lifelong journey to find and proclaim the unique truth of Buddhism, which had been all but obscured by the emergence of various misleading schools. On the 28th day of the 4th month, 1253, the Daishonin proclaimed Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to be the sole teaching leading directly to enlightenment in the latter day of the law, while denouncing the doctrines of the then prevalent Pure Land school. Tojo Kagenobu, the steward of the area and a fervent Pure Land believer, became furious on hearing of this and sent his men to the temple to arrest the Daishonin. Dozenbo, a devotee of the Pure Land school teaching, that's Nimbutsu, could not defend him openly, which again, if you don't know, that's the praying to Amida, right? Could not defend him openly, but instructed the 2 senior priests, Jokinbo and Gijobo, to guide his young disciple to safety. If he had not gotten out of there that night, none of the Buddhism of the sowing would have ever occurred. Okay? So we all owe a great debt of gratitude to Dozenbo, because he saved Nichiren in that perilous moment when he stood up for the true teaching. Nichiren Daishonin and his former teacher met again in 1264, when the Daishonin visited his home in Awa after returning from exile on the Izu Peninsula. He later wrote that Dozenbo had asked him on this occasion if his practice of the Pure Land teaching would lead him into the hell of incessant suffering. In reply, the Daishonin told Dozenbo that he could not free himself from the effects of his slander unless he revered the Lotus Sutra as the fundamental teaching. Afterward, though, Dozinbo did not entirely abandon his belief in Amida. Even though he did not entirely abandon his belief in Amida, he carved a statue of Shakyamuni Buddha. The Daishonin rejoiced that Dozinbo was apparently beginning to see his error because he felt indebted to this man who had initiated him into the priesthood and earnestly desired to lead him to the correct teaching. The Daishonin wanted to lead him to the correct teaching. Nichiren Daishonin begins this treatise by emphasizing the need to repay one's obligation to one's parents, teacher, the three treasures of Buddhism, and one's sovereign. He teaches the importance of repaying debts of gratitude as a fundamental aspect of human behavior. Fundamental means that it's basic, it's baseline. You have no sense of appreciation, no wisdom on what to appreciate, you are not even behaving as a human being. He said that at the very beginning, where even the fox returns. Well, you remember all that. We've read this several times. Of these four debts of gratitude, this work stresses specifically repaying the debt owed to one's teacher. Next, the Daishonin states that to repay such debts, one must master the truth of Buddhism and attain enlightenment. To accomplish this goal, one must dedicate oneself single-mindedly to the Buddhist practice. However, to attain enlightenment, one must also practice the correct Buddhist teaching. The Daishonin traces the development of the various schools of Buddhism in India, China, and Japan, and examines their doctrines in terms of the relative superiority of the sutras on which they are based, emphasizing the supremacy of the Lotus Sutra. In particular, he refutes the erroneous doctrines of the True Word School. He vehemently denounces Jikaku and Chisho, who, though they were patriarchs of the Japanese Tendai school, corrupted the school's profound teachings, which are based on the Lotus Sutra, by mixing them with esoteric elements, by putting magical stuff in there, the true word mudras, right? The Daishonin concludes that only the Lotus Sutra contains the ultimate truth, and moreover, that the essence of the sutra and of the whole of Buddhism is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This is the teaching to be propagated in the latter day of the law. The concluding part of this work makes clear that the Buddha of the latter day is none other than Nichiren Daishonin himself, and that the Buddhism he teaches comprises the three great secret laws, the invocation or daimoku of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the object of devotion, and the sanctuary, which are implicit, hidden in the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, but have never before been revealed. The Daishonin also makes it clear that in establishing the three great secret laws for the enlightenment of all people, he is at the same time repaying his debt of gratitude to the deceased Dozinbo. Flowering and Bearing Grain, another Gosho, written 2 years later, states, the blessings that Nichiren obtains from propagating the Lotus Sutra will always return to Dozinbo. This passage restates the message of the concluding part of this letter. The present treatise is particularly important because it is the first extant, in other words, the original of this still existed, writing in which Nichiren Daishonin specifies each of the three great secret laws, declaring that his teaching will save people for the 10,000 years of the latter day and more for all eternity. These three, the core of the Daishonin's Buddhism, represent the law that was transferred to the Bodhisattvas of the earth in the Supernatural Powers chapter for propagation in the latter day. The object of devotion is the Gohonzan that enables all people to attain Buddhahood. The Daimoku is the chanting of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with faith in the object of devotion. And the sanctuary is the place where the object of devotion is enshrined and the Daimoku is chanted to it. Okay? So we'll go to the beginning of the lecture on, the beginning of the Gosho on page 690. It starts, the old fox never forgets the hillock where he was born. By the way, this is going to have a lot of complicated Chinese names that I may not pronounce well. It's going to refer to a lot of historical persons within the lineage of different schools. It's really not important for you to understand who each one of those people is, because he's refuting the school, and therefore the teacher of the school is not to be really paid attention to anyhow. This is all for the doctrinal foundation of his teaching, so that it's based on everything that's preceded it, and there's a basis of it beyond just his opinion. Okay, this is a refutation of all the previous doctrines of all the other schools. Do you understand? Okay, so he's saying, the white turtle repaid the kindness he had received from Mao Pao. Even if lowly creatures know enough to do this, then how much more should human beings? Thus, Yu Zhang, a worthy man of old, fell on his sword in order to repay the debt he owed to his lord Chi Po. And the minister Hung Yin, for similar reasons, cut open his stomach and inserted the liver of his dead lord Duke Yi of Wei. We can say then, what can we say then of persons who are devoting themselves to Buddhism? Surely they should not forget the debts of gratitude they owe to their parents, their teacher, and their country. But if one intends to repay these great debts of gratitude, one can hope to do so only if one learns and masters Buddhism, becoming a person of wisdom. Becoming a person of wisdom means attaining Buddhahood, actually Jin and Sanzen. If one does not, one will be like a man who attempts to lead a company of the blind over bridges and across rivers when he himself has sightless eyes. Can a ship steered by someone who cannot even tell the direction of the wind ever carry the traveling merchants to the mountains where treasures lie? If one hopes to learn and master Buddhism, then one cannot do so without devoting time to the task. And if one wants to have time to spend on the undertaking, one cannot continue to wait on one's parents, one's teachers, and one's sovereign. Until one attains the road that leads to emancipation, one should not defer to the wishes and feelings of one's parents and teachers, no matter how reasonable they may be. Many people may think that counsel such as this runs counter to secular virtues and also fails to accord with the spirit of Buddhism. But in fact, secular texts such as the classic of filial piety make clear that there are times when one can be a loyal minister or a filial child only by refusing to obey the wishes of one's sovereign or parents. And in the sacred scriptures of Buddhism it is said, by renouncing one's obligations and entering the Buddhist life, one can truly pay those obligations in full. Pekan refused to go along with his sovereign's wishes and thereby became known as a worthy man. Prince Siddhartha disobeyed his father, King Shuddhodana, and yet became the most outstanding filial son in all the threefold world. These are examples of what I mean. I want to go back and say that again. But if one hopes, at the bottom of page 690, first column, if one hopes to learn and master Buddhism, then one cannot do so without devoting time to the task. So he's saying, again, you can't practice casually if you really want to attain Buddhahood. You know, you can get benefits, you can dabble, but you won't become the Buddha in your present form. You won't attain actual Ichen and Sanzen without attacking this over the entire arc of your life. Okay? Because once you fully understand it, then you have the obligation to teach others. So it never ever stops to the last moment of your life. All right? He's saying, and if one wants to have time to spend on the undertaking, which is going to take a focus, one cannot continue to wait on one's parents, one's teachers, and one's sovereign if they're telling you something different than what the true teaching is telling you. He's saying basically, if you really want to repay the debt of gratitude you have to everybody, become the Buddha. Because if you become the Buddha, they're all attached to you. They're all in your sway. They will never be, because based on dependent origination, they will never be outside the realm of your being able to facilitate their advance. It's just like Dozenbo. That's what he's saying. Basically, all of my merit's going to go to Dozenbo. Did Dozenbo create the Buddhism of sowing? No. But why am I able to create the Buddhism of sowing? Because I have the wisdom to have that gratitude, that sense of deep understanding that without this doesn't occur. And there's no separation between the two. This is the point. You don't have a separation between yourselves and others. It may seem that way because it's counterintuitive to see it any other way. But the teaching is that everything is one. Everything is connected. Everything is an entity of the mystic law. Therefore, learning how to understand that and how to convey it to others is the most important thing you could do for anybody that you owe this debt of gratitude of life toward. Your parents, your teacher, your sovereign. Do you understand? Okay. Until one attains the road that leads to emancipation, one should not defer to the wishes and feelings of one's parents and teachers, no matter how reasonable they may be, because they may keep you from advancing along the path. Okay, and many people think that this runs counter, but he's saying no, it doesn't. So, dropping to the last paragraph on 692nd column. Once I had understood this and prepared to cease deferring to my parents, who must have been Nimbutsu believers because they sent him to Seichoji Temple. Right? You understand? He didn't start out by teaching his parents when he was 12. All right? In fact, the Buddhism sowing had not even occurred yet until 1253. Right? So he's saying, once I understood this and prepared to cease deferring to my parents and teachers, Dozenbo trying to tell me to pray to Amida, and instead to delve into the truths of Buddhism independently myself, I found that there are 10 clear mirrors that reflect the sacred doctrines of the Buddha's lifetime of teachings, the entire arc of his 80,000 teachings, right? These are the 10 schools of Buddhism known as the Dharma Analysis Treasury, Establishment of Truth, Precepts, Dharma Characteristics, 3 Treatises, True Word, Flower Garland, Pure Land, Zen, and Tendai Lotus schools. Scholars today believe that with these 10 schools as enlightened teachers, one should understand the heart of all the sacred scriptures and claim that these 10 mirrors all in an accurate manner reflect the path of the Buddha's teachings. However, we may set aside for now the 3 Hinayana schools, Dharma Analysis Treasury, Establishment of the Truth, and Precepts. They are like a message that is somehow sent to a foreign country by a private citizen and therefore lacks authority. Because again, they're not even Mahayana. All right? So they're not based on helping on others attaining Buddhahood as part of the function of you attaining Buddhahood. That's how Mahayana refutes Hinayana, right? But the 7 Mahayana schools are a great ship that can carry us across the vast sea of the sufferings of birth and death and take us to the shore of the Pure Land. By practicing and understanding them, we can save ourselves and at the same time lead others to salvation. With this thought in mind, I began to examine them, I found that each of the 7 Mahayana schools sings its own praises, saying, "Our school and our school alone represents the very heart of the Buddha's lifetime of teachings." There are men such as, and here we go, Tushun, Chi Yin, Fa Tsang, and Xin Quan of the Flower Garland School, Xuan Sang, Su Yin, Chi Chao, and Chi Shou of the Dharma Characteristics School, Xing Huang, and Qi Shang of, again, you guys can do Chinese better than me, Mandarin better than me, of the 3 Treatises School, Shamu Wei, Chinkang Chi, Pukun, Kobo, Jikaku, and Chisho of the True Word School, Bodhidharma, Huiko, and Huining, I do better with Japanese guys, of the Zen School, and Tao Cho, Shantao, Huiquan, and Ginku of the Pure Land School. Basing themselves, so he just now called out all the great teachers, the historically great teachers of all those schools, okay, that are considered Buddhists. They're considered enlightened ones, okay? They're the patriarchs of those schools. They're teachers. Their doctrinal dissertations are what those schools are actually based on, right? Along with specific sutras. Okay, basing themselves on the particular sutras and treatises favored by their respective schools, these leaders of the various schools all claim that our school understands all of the myriad sutras and that our school has grasped the innermost meaning of the Buddha's teachings. Okay? Everybody's with me, right? You would expect all those schools to have that opinion, right?
Right.
Thus, some of these men claim the Flower Garland Sutra is first among all the sutras. Other sutras, such as the Lotus and the Mahavajrana, are its underlings. Again, the leaders of the True Word school claim the Mahavajrana Sutra is first among all the sutras, and the other sutras are like crowds of little stars. The men of the Zen school say the Lankavatara Sutra is first among all the sutras, and so forth. And so forth for the men of the various other schools. The many Buddhist teachers whose names I have listed above are honored by the people of our time, who pay reverence to them in the way that all the heavenly deities pay reverence to the Lord Chakra, and follow them in the way the hosts of the stars follow the sun and the moon. For ordinary people like us, whomever we may take as our teacher, if we have faith in him, then we will not think him inadequate in any way. But though others may still revere and believe in the teachers of the respective schools, I, Nichiren, now he's qualifying. I'm now going to go a little bit off here. I, Nichiren, have found it difficult to dispel my doubts. When we look at the world, we find each of the various schools saying, "We are the one, we are the one." But within a nation, there can only be one man who is sovereign. If two men try to be a sovereign, the country will know no peace. Likewise, if one house has two masters, it will surely face destruction. Must it not be the same with the sutras? Among the various sutras, there must be one that is the monarch of all. That's the logic by which he's attacking all of this. All right? And it's because it's already been qualified by Tentai who that is, by Dengyo what that is. It's the Lotus. But now he's saying this to everybody in Japan, all these people that are practicing from different schools, different teachers. Yet the 10 schools and 7 schools I have mentioned, in other words, the 3 Hinayana and the 7 Mahayana, I have mentioned, all argue with one another over which of the sutras it is and can reach no consensus. Nobody can come to an agreement. It is as though 7 men or 10 men were all trying to be the monarch of a single nation, thus keeping the populace in constant turmoil. Wondering how to resolve this dilemma, I made a vow. I decided that I would not heed the claims of these 8 or 10 schools, but would do as the great teacher Tentai did and let the sutras themselves be my sole teacher. In this way, determining which of the various teachings of the Buddha's lifetime are superior and which are inferior. With this in mind, I began to read through all the sutras. Okay, is everybody with me? Mm-hmm. All right. In a scripture called the Nirvana Sutra, the Buddha says, rely on the law and not upon persons. Relying on the law here means relying on the various sutras. Not relying upon persons means not relying on persons other than the Buddha, such as the Bodhisattvas Universal Worthy and Manjushri, or the various Buddhist teachers I have enumerated earlier, okay, who also expound, are people that have expounded things that were recorded as sutras. In the same sutra, the Buddha also says, in the Nirvana, he says, in the same sutra, the Buddha also says, rely on sutras that are complete and final, and not on those that are not complete and final. When he speaks of the sutras that are complete and final, he is referring to the Lotus Sutra. And when he speaks of those that are not complete and final, he means the Flower Garland, Mahavajrana, Nirvana, and other sutras preached before, during, and after the preaching of the Lotus Sutra. Because it's in the depths of the 16th chapter of the Lotus Sutra is the only place you find Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's why they're incomplete. Okay? That's why they don't have the ability to convey the correct teaching for the latter day. If we are able to believe these dying words of the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, where this all started, we must conclude that the Lotus Sutra is the only bright mirror we should have, and that through it we can understand the heart of all the sutras. Accordingly, Let us turn to the text of the Lotus Sutra itself. There we find it stated that this Lotus Sutra is the secret storehouse of the Buddhas, the thus come ones. Among the sutras, it holds the highest place. Now, that's straight out of the Lotus Sutra. If we accept these words of the sutra, then like the Lord of Chakra dwelling on the peak of Mount Sumeru, like the wish-granting jewel that crowns the wheel-turning kings, like the moon that dwells above the forest of trees, like the knot of flesh that tops the head of a Buddha, so the Lotus Sutra stands like a wish-granting jewel crowning the flower garland, Mahevrochana, Nirvana, and all the other sutras. In other words, they all become validated once we understand what the correct teaching is. There are aspects of the perfect teaching in all those other sutras, right? We understand that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. If we set aside the pronouncements of the scholars and teachers and rely upon the text of the sutra, then we can see that the Lotus Sutra is superior to the Mahevrochana, flower garland, and all the other sutras as plainly and as easily as a sighted person can distinguish heaven from earth when the sun is shining in a clear blue sky. And if we examine the texts of the Mahevrochana, flower garland, and other sutras, we will find that there is not a word or even a brushstroke in them that resembles the above cited passage of the Lotus Sutra. Everybody's with me? There is no declaration that this is the foundation of all the Buddhas, okay? True, at times they speak about the superiority of the Mahayana Sutras as compared to the Hinayana Sutras, or of the Buddhist truth as opposed to secular truth. Or they praise the truth of the middle way as opposed to the various views that phenomena are non-substantial or that they have only temporary existence. And everybody understands what he's saying there, right? Truth in the middle way is that it's neither temporary existence nor non-substantiality. But in fact, that is the truth of the middle way. But in fact, they are like the rulers of petty kingdoms who, when addressing their subjects, speak of themselves as great kings. It is the Lotus Sutra, in comparison to these various rulers, is the true great king. The Nirvana Sutra alone of all the sutras has passages that resemble those of the Lotus Sutra. For this reason, the Buddhist scholars who preceded Tiantai in both northern and southern China were led astray into declaring that the Lotus Sutra is inferior to the Nirvana Sutra, because the Nirvana Sutra came last. But if we examine the text of the Nirvana Sutra itself, we will find that, as in the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, which precedes the Lotus Sutra, the comparison is being made between the Nirvana Sutra and the sutras of the flower garland, Agama, correct and equal, and wisdom periods that were expounded during the first 40 and more years of the Buddha's preaching life. It is in comparison to these earlier sutras that the Nirvana declares itself to be superior. All right? He says, now to back up this assertion, he says, moreover, the Nirvana Sutra, comparing itself with the Lotus Sutra, says, when this Nirvana Sutra was preached, the prediction had already been made in the Lotus Sutra that the 8,000 voice hearers would attain Buddhahood, a prediction that was like a great harvest. Thus, the autumn harvest was over and the crop had been stored away for winter when the Nirvana Sutra was expounded, and there was nothing left for it but a few gleanings. That's from the Nirvana. So he's saying all the most important stuff has already been said. All right? This passage from the Nirvana is saying that the Nirvana is inferior to the Lotus Sutra. The above passages from the Lotus and Nirvana Sutras are perfectly clear on this point. Nevertheless, even the great scholars of northern and southern China went astray, so students of later ages should take care to examine them very thoroughly. He's saying, all of you that have not read all the sutras, I have, and this is what it says. For the passage from the Lotus Sutra not only establishes the superiority of the Lotus Sutra over the Nirvana Sutra, but indicates its superiority over all other sutras in the world of the 10 worlds, in the worlds of the 10 directions. In other words, everywhere. There is no greater teaching than the Lotus. Earlier, if there were those who were misled concerning these passages, but after the great teachers Tiantai, Miolo, and Dingyo had clearly indicated their meaning, one would suppose that any person with eyes would understand them. Nevertheless, even such men as Jikaku and Chisho of the Tendai school failed to understand these passages correctly. So what can one expect from the members of the other schools? Someone might doubt my words. Does everybody understand what he said? Everybody's with me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The most correct teaching up to the point of the bosom of sewing is Tendai Lotus, which is Tendai, Miolo, Dengyo. Okay? And then the Jikaku and Chisho were actually the third or fourth patriarchs of the Mount Hei. So what can we from the members of the other schools? Someone might doubt my words. Bottom of page 693 on the first column. Someone might doubt my words, saying that although the Lotus Sutra is the finest among all the sutras that have been brought to China and Japan, in India, in the palaces of the Dragon Kings, the realms of the 4 heavenly kings, the realms of the sun and the moon, the heaven of the 33 gods, or the Tushita heaven, for instance, there are as many sutras as there are sands in the Ganges. Among these, there may there not be one that is superior to the Lotus Sutra. So he's saying, basically, I'm declaring that the Lotus Sutra is superior, but others might say, well, there are other sutras we don't even know about. How do you know there isn't one over there that's superior? Mm-hmm. He answers, I would reply that by looking at one thing, you can surmise 10,000. This is what is meant by the statement that you can come to know all under heaven without ever going out of your garden gate. But a fool will have doubts, saying, I have seen the sun, I have seen the sky in the south, but I have not seen the sky in the east or west or north. Perhaps the sky in those other 3 directions has a different sun in it from the ones I know. Or he will see a column of smoke rising up beyond the hills, and although the smoke is in plain sight, because he cannot see the fire itself, he will conclude that the fire may not really exist. Such a person is my questioner. Such a person is my questioner, an ichkantika, or person of incorrigible disbelief, no different from a man with sightless eyes. In other words, there are going to be people that no matter what you say, it's not in their karma to be able to perceive and understand what you're saying, which is why you must be very careful about who you share this with, this kind of a level of depth of text, okay? And that's why I don't ask that our videos be out in the full community, because anybody that watches this has a connection to this group. In the Teacher of the Law chapter, middle of second column, page 63, in the Teacher of the Law chapter of the Lotus Sutra, the Thus Come One Shakyamuni, uttering words of absolute sincerity from his golden mouth, establishes the relative superiority of the various sutras he expounded during the 50 or so years of his preaching life, saying, the sutras I have preached number immeasurable thousands, 10,000s, millions. Among the sutras I have preached, now preach, and will preach, which would include the Nirvana, this Lotus Sutra is the most difficult to believe and the most difficult to understand, because it's what leads to Buddhahood. Though this statement is a declaration of a single Buddha, the Thus Come One Shakyamuni, all the bodhisattvas from the stage of near perfect enlightenment on down should honor it and have faith in it. For the Buddha many treasures came from the East and testified to the truth of these words. If you know the Lotus Sutra, you know what I'm talking about, right? And the emanation Buddhas assembled from the 10 directions, from the 10 directions also, and extended their long, broad tongues up to the Brahma heaven, just as Shakyamuni Buddha did, in order to show that this was a true statement. Afterward, they all returned to their respective lands. The words have preached, now preach, and will preach include not only the sutras preached by Shakyamuni in his 50 years of teaching, but all the sutras preached by the Buddhas of the 10 directions and the 3 existences, without setting aside a single character or even a single brushstroke. Okay? So he's saying in the entire universe, there is no greater, higher teaching than the Lotus Sutra. Okay? Because the Lotus Sutra has hidden in its depths the true teaching of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. It is in comparison to all of these that the Lotus Sutra is proclaimed to be superior. At that time, the Buddhas of the 10 directions indicated their agreement beyond all doubt. If, after they had returned to their respective lands, they had told their disciples that there was in fact a sutra that is superior to the Lotus Sutra, do you suppose their disciples would ever have believed them? In other words, after this ceremony, when they all declared it the supreme teaching of all teachings, if they say anything other than that, no one's going to believe them, won't happen. That's not true. If there are those who, though they have not seen with their own eyes, nevertheless suspect that there may be a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra, somewhere in India, or in the palaces of the Dragon Kings, the 4 heavenly kings, or the gods of the sun and the moon, I would say this: were not Brahma, Shakra, the gods of the sun and the moon, the 4 heavenly kings, and the Dragon Kings present when Shakyamuni preached the Lotus Sutra? They were a part of the assembly, right? So how could they have some other teaching that they're hiding out? If the sun and the moon and other deities should say, there's a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra, you merely do not know about it, then they would be a sun and moon who speak great falsehoods. In that case, I would berate them, saying, sun and moon, you dwell up in the sky rather than on the ground as we do, and yet you never fall down. This is because of the power you gain by observing most strictly the precept of never telling a lie. But now if you tell this great lie by saying there is a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra, I am certain that even before the kalpa of decline arrives, you will come plummeting down to earth. What is more, you will not stop falling until you have reached the depths of the great citadel of the hell of incessant suffering that is surrounded by solid iron. Beings who tell such great lies should not be allowed to remain a moment longer in the sky, circling above the 4 continents of the earth. That is how I would berate them. Pretty strong words. So he's letting you know he would not cut them any slack at all. Yet, such men of great wisdom, such great teachers and Tripitaka masters as Chuin Kang of the Flower Garland School, or Shanwu Wei, Shinkan Puchi, Pukun, Kobo, Jikaku, and Chisho of the True Word School proclaim that the Flower Garland and Mahevrochana Sutras are superior to the Lotus Sutra. Though it is not for me to judge in such matters, he's being humble here, I would say that in light of the higher principles of Buddhism, such men would appear to be arch enemies of the Buddhists. Because the Buddhists have declared one thing and now they're contradicting them. Mm-hmm. Do you understand why he's saying that? Why they're arch enemies? Do you understand why he's just declared them arch enemies? Because they're going against a teaching that all the Buddhas of the 10 directions have declared is the supreme teaching in the universe. Mm-hmm. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. Is everybody with me? Does anybody have any questions? I kind of see one on your face, Zoe.
But he read all the sutras, right?
Who? Nichiren. Yes, he already read all the sutras.
But the people that are saying our school did they...
Probably not. Actually, that's how he always shut all them down in debate. Oh. They were very singly focused. I mean, if you entered an Nembutsu school, why would you study True Word, the Mahevrochana Sutra? You wouldn't. You'd do the 3 Amida Sutras. You know, if you were a Flower Garland person, you'd do the Ocean Meditation, Mind Print, whatever the hell. Okay? I mean, there were different teachings for different schools, and none of them agreed that, and they all said they all are the same. They all lead to Buddhahood. That was the general, that's the thing that you have to understand is what Nichiren is going up against, is that
They all say that
They're all the same. They all
what
lead to
is-
Buddhahood. And what he's clarifying now is that
It's
no,
not
they
true.
don't,
No, they
because in
don't.
the latter day of the law, they've already all been declared to be slanderous based on the teaching of the Lotus. That's what he just now qualified here. Do you understand?
But they were necessary to lead
No,
to
they were necessary for the people of the former or the middle day of the law. They are completely unnecessary in the latter day of the law. That's what he's basically saying. Okay? They have no place in the latter day other than to cause confusion. Why would you need to know all those other sutras if you already know the great pure law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and have the object of devotion of the three great secret laws? There would be no... What do you need to know more about Buddhism than what Nichiren's telling you? Nothing. Nothing more than something that might dilute the point that he's trying to make, which is that the supreme teaching is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And where does Nam-myoho Renge-kyo come from? The Lotus Sutra. That's why he's qualifying the Lotus Sutra as being the supreme sutra among all sutras, because he's going to divine this in the depths of the 16th chapter, the great pure law that becomes the correct teaching in the latter day of the law.
But you're talking to this kind of people anyway. You cannot convince them of anything.
He's not trying to convince anybody but the two priests from Seicho-ji. This letter is written to them.
Yeah.
Okay? It's been kept for posterity for us to be able to have that same truth revealed to us. But do understand, he's not talking to he's even said, by the way, don't share this with anybody because they don't know enough to understand what you're going to say to them. And they may ask questions that's going to create doubt or even anger towards what you're saying. And even though they don't mean it that way, they will be slandering Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in doing so. Don't forget, I'm talking about sutras, but he's really talking about Nam-myoho Renge-kyo because it's the latter day of the law. He's really talking about his teaching, the Buddhism of the sowing, not the Buddhism of the harvest. He's not even talking about the Lotus Sutra, really. He's going to get to that later. I can't skip ahead and tell you, but we'll get to that point. All right? He maintains modesty. Though it is not for me to judge in such matters, I would say in light of the higher principles of Buddhism, such men would appear. Okay? So, where am I? Question. Okay. Let me start. Okay. Such men of great wisdom, such as the teachers and Tripitaka masters, second column, page 694, first full paragraph. After he just berated the gods of the sun and the moon. Yet such men of great wisdom, such as great teachers and Tripitaka masters, and this is the whole thing. His whole teaching is to give all that up. Okay? Because you don't need that as a person of the latter day of the law. The seed of your Buddhahood is either being sown for the first time or you're a direct disciple, an original disciple of the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo thus come one. You don't have a relationship to Shakyamuni. Okay? All those other sutras are about Shakyamuni relationship people. Okay? You are not one of them. No one in the latter day of the law is one of them. There's a lot of mental masturbation to go into all that in the latter day of the law after the correct teaching's been revealed. What, you got to revalidate what he's saying to you? That's why I started this whole thing with a point of faith. What is the basis of this whole Buddhism of the sowing? Faith. And what is that faith all about? It's a faith in the teaching. What is the teaching? What I'm reading to you right now. Okay? So when he says that, I don't question it. Anybody that wants to may. It's your prerogative. But he also qualifies what the result of that will be. Okay? Which is why he says, don't teach this to people that may question what I'm saying. Only teach people that are seeking to understand. All right? Again, from page 694, that's why, again, he would make everybody angry, saying, no, don't do Nimbutsu. You cannot do. You're a slanderer if you do Nimbutsu. You're a slanderer if you do true word. No matter what's in your heart, you're doing an incorrect act. It's based on causality, not intent. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, he's going to qualify. Let me keep reading. Such men of great wisdom, he qualifies them as men of great wisdom, such great teachers and Tripitaka masters of Shinquan of the Flower Garland School. Now, in 13th century Japan, everybody knows who that is, all right? Or Shanwu Wei, Qinquang, Qi, and Pukun, Kobo, Jikaku, and Shisho of True Word. Everybody knows who that is. And they revere them. And now he's saying, don't revere them anymore. That's what this whole lecture, this whole Gosho is about. Proclaim that the Flower Garland and the Heirachana Sutras are superior to the Lotus. Okay, they say that it's superior to the Lotus. That's in conflict with what the Buddhas of the 10 Directions said in the Lotus. Do you understand? That's why it's a slander to say that. Do you understand? They're not entitled to their opinion. Their opinion is in conflict with the teaching of the Buddhas of the 10 Directions that declared at the assembly that the Lotus is the supreme teaching of all sutras throughout the 10 Directions. You remember what I've just read, right? You cool with that? Okay. Though it is not for me to judge in such matters, I would say that in light of the higher principles of Buddhism, such men would appear to be arch enemies of the Buddhas. Would they not? Because they're preaching a teaching in conflict with that which has been declared by the Buddhas of the 10 Directions as the supreme sutra, the Lotus, the sutra by which each one of them attained Buddhahood. You read the Lotus Sutra, right? You were here when we read it, right? You know what it says then, all right? Beside them, evil men such as Devadatta, Kokelika are as nothing. In fact, they are in a class with Mahadeva and the great arrogant Brahman. And those who put faith in the teachings of such men, they too are a fearful lot indeed. Okay, so he's disqualifying everybody that believes in those teachings. Question: do you really proclaim that Qing Quan of the Flower Garland School, Chiashang of the Three Treatises School, Su En of the Dharma Characteristics School, and Shanwu Wei and the others of the True Word School, on down to Kobo, Jikaku, and Shisho, are the enemies of the Buddha? Just like you just asked. Really? And he's going to say yes. Answer: this is a very important question. So it's a reasonable question. And it's a very important question. And it's a matter of gravest concern to the Buddhist teaching. So if you don't understand this, then you're never going to get what I'm saying everywhere else I'm saying it. All right? Yet, on examining the text of the sutra, I find that if someone should declare that there is a sutra superior to the Lotus Sutra, then regardless of who that person may be, he or she cannot escape the charge of slandering the law. There's your answer. Therefore, if we go by what the sutra says, then persons such as this must be regarded as enemies of the Buddha. And he's the first person that ever saw it this way. Okay? Because it's now the latter day. And the power of the sutras from the Buddhism of the harvest have expired. All right? And if out of fear, just like me, if out of fear, because I don't want to take the shit from people that are going to disagree with the position I'm taking as I read this, if out of fear I fail to point out this fact, then the distinction of relative merit made among the various sutras will all have been made in vain. All right? If out of awe of these great teachers of the past, I should simply point at their latter-day followers and call them enemies of the Buddha, then these latter-day followers of various schools would say the assertion that the Mahayana Sutra is superior to the Lotus Sutra is not something that we ourselves invented on our own. It is the doctrine taught by the patriarchs of our school. Though we may be no match for them in observing the precepts in wisdom and understanding or in status, when it comes to the doctrines that they taught, we never diverge from them in the slightest. And in that case, one would have to admit that they are guilty of no fault. Okay, if I try to blame it only on the people that are still doing this, and I don't declare that the original teachers went against the teaching, the original, again, people of the former day and the middle day occurred after the assembly where the Lotus Sutra was preached. So the teaching that the Lotus Sutra is superior already existed before any of those guys made their commentaries or supported the teachings of those schools. Do you understand? So they didn't follow the Buddha's direction, which was honestly discarding expedient means, not accepting even a single word of the provisional sutras. That's in the Lotus Sutra, right? Okay, honestly discarding expedient means not accepting even a single word says you blow off all of those other sutras. Yeah, that's what that's saying, isn't it?
Oh.
No? You didn't understand that?
Yeah, but they are more on this side than...
Who gives a shit? That has nothing to do with anything.
Right.
Yeah. What's that got to do with anything? That means India is the greatest country in the world, or China is the greatest. I mean, there's more of them than there are of any other people in any other country. I mean, it's not about numbers. It's about what's correct. It's not about popular opinion. It's what's correct. At the time he's saying this, no one understands this.
Right.
Yet he's saying it definitively, cutting them no slack, because the 10,000 years of Mappo is a long time, and that ratio won't remain. Our goal is Kosen Rufu.
Yes.
If we accomplish Kosen Rufu, as he says we will,
Yes.
are there going to be so many on that side and not so many on this side? In Japan today, what's the greatest school? What's the greatest number of people that believe in one thing? Soka Gakkai!
It is?
Yes!
Yes.
It's the biggest school in Japan, period. It's not even a school. It's like a lay organization that became a school. It's bigger than the Fuji School. It's bigger than Nichiren Shu, Minobu School. Okay? There's nothing bigger already in Japan. This has already occurred in Japan. But this teaching is for the whole world. Why I'm speaking it and reading it in English and hoping everybody understands what I'm saying without slandering. That's why I ask if you have questions like Anik just had, please put them in. If you want to challenge anything I'm saying, go for it. I have no problem with you doing that. But make me aware of it. Don't just think it to yourself. Okay? You too. All right? So, he says, nevertheless, if I know that this assertion is false, just like me, and yet out of fear of others I fail to say so, then I will be ignoring the stern warnings of the Buddha, who said it is like a royal envoy who would rather, even though it costs him his life, in the end conceals none of the words of his ruler. What am I to do? If I speak up, I face fearful opposition from the world at large. But if I am silent, I can hardly escape the condemnation of failing to heed the Buddha's stern warning. What's more important? What common mortals think? I want to become an enlightened one. I am an enlightened one. I can't become a common mortal again. It's too late. Forward or backward, my way is blocked. And it is. It is. For anyone that has complete faith in the Daishonin's teaching, that's what he's trying to say. There's only one way, and it's forward, upward. Yet, perhaps, it is only to be expected. For, as the Lotus Sutra states, since hatred and jealousy toward the Sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more so will be this after? How much more will this be so after his passing? So I'm ready. Again, I'm talking personally. Again, elsewhere, it will face much hostility in the world and be difficult to believe. I'm sure this is difficult for you to believe if you don't already understand the whole breadth of his teaching. When Shakyamuni Buddha had been conceived by his mother, Lady Maya, the devil king of the sixth heaven gazed down into Lady Maya's womb and said, "My archenemy, the sharp sword of the Lotus Sutra, has been conceived. Before the birth can take place, I must do something to destroy it." Then the devil king transformed himself into a learned physician, entered the palace of King Suddhodana, and said, "I am a learned physician, and I have brought some excellent medicine that will ensure the safe delivery of the child." In this way, he attempted to poison Lady Maya. When the Buddha was born, the devil king caused stones to rain down on him and mixed poison in his milk. Later, when the Buddha left the palace to enter the religious life, the devil king changed himself into a black, venomous serpent and tried to block his way. In addition, he entered the bodies, this is all in sutras. In addition, he entered the bodies of such evil men as Devadatta, Kokelika, King Virud. It's harder for me to pronounce these because they don't have the lines that, if you do this online, instead of reading out of the book, it's got diacritical marks. It's easier for you to get correct pronunciation. So I said, in addition, he entered the bodies of such evil men as Devadatta, Kokelika, King Virudhaka, and King Ajatashatru, inciting them to hurl a great stone at the Buddha that injured him and drew blood, or to kill many of the Shakyas. His whole clan got wiped out, right? The Buddha's clansmen, or murder his disciples. These great persecutions were planned long ago, schemes that were designed to prevent the Buddha, the world-honored one, from preaching the Lotus Sutra, to get to the end of his life when that was actually done, when it was preached. It is persecutions such as these that the sutra means when it says, hatred and jealousy toward the sutra abound even when the thus come one is in the world. In addition to these troubles arising long before the Buddha preached the Lotus Sutra, there were others that occurred later when he expounded the sutra itself. These were the doubts that arose when Shakyamuni revealed that for some 40 years, Shariputra, Madhayana, and the great bodhisattvas that had in fact been among the arch enemies and the great bodhisattvas had in fact been among the arch enemies of the Lotus Sutra. Does everybody understand why he said that? Okay, these were all his voice hearer disciples. These were his main guys, right? But he's saying, there were doubts. How could these guys that are my main guys be arch enemies of the Lotus Sutra? What were those people, though? What did we call them? We called them persons of the two vehicles, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, what was the problem with persons of the two vehicles? They lacked the compassion of the bodhisattva, actually. They were only concerned about the attainment of their own emancipation. All right? And that's what he clarifies in the Lotus Sutra as being the mistaken understanding. They still think that they can never be Buddhas or they will take many lifetimes. He's saying, hey, you guys are already on that path. Where am I? Next page.
Yeah.
Okay. Right? 696?
Yes.
Oh, I'm already there, aren't I? Okay. And where? Okay.
Yes.
Arch enemies of the Lotus Sutra. Okay, I'll stop there. Page 695. And again, if there was anything that was confusing in this first few pages, my God, we've only read 5 pages. So the 10 sessions, I guess. Okay?
Yeah.
You okay?
Yeah.
Now you understand why he said in the cover letter what he said in the cover letter. Okay? So we will start next week on page 696 at the top. All right?
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.